Welcome to Night Talks, the University of Florida's College of Journalism and Communications talk show produced by students for students. I'm Matt Abramson, a double-gator with the College of Journalism, and today our guest is Wendi Goodman, who held leadership roles with agencies including Klein Davis and Mann and Agency RX. Now she's the Executive Vice President and Executive Director of FCB Health New York, one of the world's most awarded communications networks focused on healthcare and the healthcare space. Hi, Wendi. Thank you for joining us today.
Hi, nice to be here.
Great to have you. As a journalism graduate of the CJC, how did that experience prepare you for the trajectory of your career?
It actually prepared me a lot. Being a journalism major here taught me how to write. I still remember reporting class here, which was the hardest class I ever took, but I came out of there knowing how to write, and that was a huge help in working in advertising at any communication field. So that was one of the big ones. Also, at the time, I don't know if you still have to do it, I was required to take public speaking classes, or at least one, and that really helped me a lot as well. And learning how to tell a story, really important in journalism, really important in advertising as well.
Oh yeah, storytelling is huge. One of your first roles was as Senior Account Executive with McAdams Agency. Tell us about that organization and the role that you played there.
So this was a healthcare agency. I worked with pharmaceutical companies for their clients. In fact, one of the brands I worked on was Claritin when it was a prescription drug. I was, a junior person. I just learned as much as I could do and did everything, whatever they asked me to do, I did.
Then you moved to CDM and held many positions there. What was unique about CDM and what did those positions entail?
So I was at CDM for a really long time, and I kept getting promoted every few years. That was really my home, and I learned everything about advertising at that point. I launched drugs there. I worked with different teams there. I gained more responsibility as I worked there. At the time, it was a smaller agency, and it was a great community of people, and we were all in it together, and it was a great, wonderful experience for a very long time.
When you started, what role did you come in as?
I started there, I think, also as an account supervisor, got promoted up in the course of like 10 or 11, 12 years to the vice president and a senior vice president. And I just had different brands. I worked a lot with Pfizer. I worked a lot in the cardiovascular space at that time.
What goes into launching a brand? So you mentioned that was one of the things that you did.
Launching a brand is a lot. So in the healthcare space, we all talk about drugs and what drugs you're taking and what's new and what's not. And you have to really understand the science behind the drug. You have to understand what are doctors interested in learning and hearing about the drug. How do you position it? All of these things that are things you learn in the advertising school here. So you put all of that together. What's the story that you want to tell? What's the creative going to look like? And then you wait until the FDA approves your drug. And when you get that approval, it is huge, but then you got to get everything out, right? So you have to get all the materials out. You have a field force that's going to be selling your product, and so you have to get all the materials ready for the field force. You have to get not then, but now, everything ready online. So is your website ready? Is all of your digital advertising ready? Is everything that you could imagine to market a drug has to be done and ready to flip the switch once you get the approval.
And then, of course, the catchy jingle has to already be pre-done.
Yeah, the catchy jingle. So, on healthcare advertising space, there's two sides of it. There's the catchy jingle on the commercials that you all see. We call that direct-to-consumer or DTC advertising, which the hope is that as a consumer, you hear about a drug or a disease state that you may have, and you go and talk to your doctor about it, right? The other side is to the healthcare professionals. So you want to talk to physicians and nurses, and how do you communicate with them? And so you have to have that level of expertise, more clinical, more serious, to just explain what this drug is, what's the efficacy data, what is the safety data, and why would you want to prescribe it as a physician.
What were some of the biggest challenges that you faced as you moved up through your career?
I think some of the biggest challenges were trying to do too much and really kind of pushing the clients to do something that either they didn't have the budget for, or they weren't ready for, or were wrong. I wanted to do it, but maybe it didn't make sense. And so how do you navigate that? How do you build teams as I got more senior? There are different talent that you need, and sometimes you can have one quiet person on your team, that's fine, but you don't want 5 quiet people on your team. So how do you kind of work through that? It took me a long time to figure that piece of it out. And I would say the third challenge is an ongoing challenge, and I don't know the challenge as much as the industry is always changing, and you have to absolutely stay on top of it. And if you don't, you will get left behind. And so, for me, making sure I am as in tune with the new digital media, social media, what's happening as our customers are is incredibly important.
Exactly. If your customers are moving to VR or Substacks or TikTok, you have to follow them.
You got to follow them. You do. And so, I have friends that are like, why are you on TikTok? I'm like, because that's where my customers are. That's where the patients are. They're talking about like these disease states in a way that's so innovative on TikTok. So yeah, you go on TikTok and you listen to their stories and you see their videos.
All the agencies are located in New York that you've been working for. Did you always envision yourself living there, or did that just happen through the professional career path that you ended up going through?
So I grew up in New York on Long Island, and the fact that I flew down to Florida and went to University of Florida back in the 90s was kind of unusual.
So that's a bigger question.
Yeah,
what brought
right?
you down here?
I just always loved the University of Florida, great school, and I wanted to go to a big rah-rah school, but I always kind of knew that I was going to come back to New York. It was not really that much of a question. So when I came back, as I said earlier, I was a journalism major. I graduated in a year where there were no jobs in journalism. Actually, there still are no jobs in journalism, but at the time, there were none. And so I said, well, I need to work. And so I wound up in advertising. I had 2 job offers. One was at a consumer shop, one was at a healthcare shop, and I picked the healthcare shop because it paid more. And 30 years later, I'm still here because I love it.
And you're here as well to help find the future talent in the Gator Nation and bring them to New York.
100%.
Why is that an emphasis to find Gators that you can bring back to the agencies?
Well, there's a few reasons. I think number one, they're smart. So any of the folks that I have met that have gone to University of Florida or have been in the journalism school at Florida have been really bright, really ambitious, and they know what they're doing, and they're independent thinkers, and that's what we're looking for. Number 2, obviously, I went to University of Florida, so I have an affinity. I see a Gator on my resume, I want to talk to them. A lot of advertising agencies in New York, they're all about Syracuse and Newhouse and all the Northeast schools who wanted to bring in some Southern blood in there. University of Florida is also known for its diversity, and that's something that is super, super important to IPG Health and FCB Health, which is where I am. And so, it's the right talent pool. They're smart, they're ambitious. Why wouldn't we want to come down here and meet you all?
Absolutely. You know what you get with the Gator Standard.
I mean, it's a good standard.
Absolutely. You were a managing partner and the director of client services at Agency RX. Can you explain what the experience was like and what is a conflict shop?
So in advertising, especially in the healthcare space, you work at one agency, but if you are working, let's say, on a drug for depression with one client, and then another client comes back and has another drug for depression, they compete with each other. So a conflict shop is literally that. It's you take some of your senior leaders at one organization, you bring them to another, you firewall them, so different teams, you don't share files, everything is separate, and then you could support another set of clients. So at the time, and this is years ago, Agency RX doesn't even exist anymore, but at the time I was at CDM, and then I wound up, shifting over to one agency, and then eventually to Agency RX to support different conflicts that we had. I think, the impact, let's be honest, now you have 2 different clients that are, working on the same therapeutic area, and so it's helpful, and, it kind of expands your bottom line. It gives people the opportunity to grow and to get promoted into different roles that maybe they wouldn't have had the opportunity to at one agency. So I always think it's a great idea if you are working at an agency and you have that opportunity to go to one of their sister shops. Do it, because you can learn something new. We talk about all the time at my agency something called proactive career management. This is an amazing thing. This is not just you saying, hey, I've been doing this for a year and I'm advocating for myself, give me a promotion. No. What we mean by proactive career management is thinking about your career and saying, I've worked in this brand for several years. I want to work on a global piece of business, or I want to work on a consumer piece of business, or I want to, do a launch. And you can go to your supervisor and we will make that happen for you. And not only is it working on a different type of business, you can switch your trajectory. So if you were a copywriter and say, you know what, I want to do broadcast, then you can, go into a different group as well. So I think one of the great benefits of where I am at now, IPG Health and FCB Health, is that it's a really big organization and there's lots of opportunities to kind of think about your career in a broader way.
When you go to a conflict shop, are you basically on another location? It's that sort of unraveled from the previous organization, not even sharing like any resources necessarily?
No, there are definitely resources that get shared. So, for example, we have a production studio and all the agencies will share that production studio, but that core team will be dedicated to one piece of business or the other. And quite frankly, it's easier to do it now that, since COVID and everybody is working remote, it's not like that physical space. Yes, the agencies definitely have different physical spaces, but it's easier because so many people are working remote now or hybrid.
Then you left CDM to be the Executive Vice President and Executive Director of FCB Health New York. Tell us about the position you took on for that organization and what you do there.
So at FCB Health New York, which is in New York City, we are part of a larger holding company called IPG Health. And IPG Health is the largest healthcare network in the world. It's massive. We work in every market that you can imagine. My role at FCB Health New York is I oversee a large group, a large team. I work with very varied clients. Clients like Novartis and Sanofi is another big client that I work with. And then I also work with a lot of smaller startup companies that are launching their first product, which is really exciting. So our teams do everything on the patient side. We work with physicians and peer-to-peer, so doctor to doctor. We work with materials for the field force. Again, same thing I've been saying, we tell the stories of these brands. And so I have that role, and then I also work on the executive leadership of FCB Health New York. So we are bringing the culture of our agency to everybody, which is a lot harder to do now that we're in this post-COVID world. It used to be back in 2019 in the olden days, everybody came into the office every single day. We had 3 floors in the middle of Manhattan and it was packed every single day. And yes, the technology to do meetings on Zoom or Teams was there, but nobody really used it. And now that has changed. I think in some ways it's changed for the better in that people used to be at the agency, especially the more junior people that were getting all the jobs through the system and you had to be there live to check changes and do the routing. Now you can do that at home. And that's really nice. And so you're not having to sit in the office until 10, 11 o'clock at night. I think where maybe it's not so great is that collaboration isn't quite there as much as it was. And I feel bad because I think some of the guys that are coming into the industry now and they're working, yes, you meet people, but it's definitely a little bit more of an effort. You have to work harder at it. The advice I always give to people when they join my team is, look, when you're on these Teams meetings, please be on camera. I know you don't want to be, but please do it because that's how we get to know you. Yeah. And I think that's important. And so there's definitely been an adjustment. But I will say our agency has grown and we have, kind of mastered it. I launched a drug completely through COVID, more than one, because the business keeps going. There's always going to be a new drug for people.
Absolutely. It's funny you mentioned networking being sort of impacted by COVID, and I hadn't really thought about that, but my first job right out of the college, was at a local TV station, and I was not going to stay there particularly long. And I found my next job by networking and going to an after party after a long day of work.
To this day, some of my closest friends are the friends that I met when I first started working, at those agencies. And it's nice when you are new to any industry and you're sitting in sort of together, you can just ask people questions. It becomes very easy to sort of have that camaraderie and have those people there. So while we don't want to make people come back to the office every day, and we will never go back to that world likely, it is nice when you can have that experience. And as much as you can replicate that using the technology that we have, I think that makes a lot of sense as well. But it is also really nice because we now are able to have talent from all over the country that before we weren't able to have because people didn't want to come to New York. And so now we can hire people from Gainesville that maybe don't want to come to New York but are really super smart and want to work, and and then we have that opportunity to work with them as well, which is great.
So you mentioned launching a brand in COVID. What was the process of the creative and the planning and then the eventual launch?
So typically how we would launch a new brand, and then I'll explain why it was different during COVID, is you have to understand what it is about the brand that is special, right? What is the positioning? What is the story of the brand? What is the creative that's going to break through? We typically will work to prepare for a launch at least a year, if not 15 months before the product actually launches. So we've been doing all of this work all along, and then we're getting ready for the FDA to approve we have everything set and ready to go, and then we're preparing for what we have a big launch meeting. All the sales representatives come in to one place, and we train them on the drug and on all the materials, and then they're supposed to go out and go talk to all the doctors, right? So unfortunately, COVID hit and every doctor's office was closed. Reps weren't going anywhere. Nobody was getting on a plane. We couldn't fly them anywhere. So we had to turn that all and do everything virtual. The reps usually would do a face-to-face meeting. Now they're doing it on Teams or on Zoom. And so we had to prepare the materials for a digital audience. Everybody was online so much more at that time, and they still are. And it really forced us to have a very big multi-channel plan. So we were talking to doctors and consumers or customers across the board in a lot of different channels that maybe we weren't focused on at launch in the past.
It's almost like the challenge lent itself as an opportunity.
100%. It definitely accelerated what was already happening in the healthcare space, but it absolutely accelerated it so that just more was happening, and we would see the returns on it. So it made sense to keep doing it.
I have to ask, have you ever prepped a product and then it doesn't get the license, the FDA?
Oh, and it is the most painful thing in the world.
Like
yes.
A year of preparation and then nope, rug's pulled out from underneath you.
We've been there. I mean, I've prepared to do a new business pitch where we're going to a new client and they have a product that's going to be coming, and then you work on this, a presentation for 2 weeks. You go in, you do this wonderful presentation, and then the client's like, yes, this is great, we want to hire you. And then 2 months later, their data comes through and they didn't hit their endpoints, and then it's all gone. It's painful. I mean, I've had times where, we've been working on something for a year, and then, the FDA is like, and then they don't launch the drug, and then, you cry. It's hard. You put your heart and soul into this.
That would feel devastating.
Yeah.
Especially if you feel like you have such a strong plan for it, and then you can't even execute the plan.
Yeah, and and you believe in the drug, and you believe that it's really going to help people. But, that is the nature of our business. A lot more, I've had a lot more launches than not, thankfully.
If only it was a placebo and it would just work in general.
Exactly.
So Wendi, can you discuss the challenge of making informative and helpful advertising while avoiding anything unethical or manipulative in your marketing?
Absolutely, and I will say, it's a great question. In healthcare advertising or in pharmaceutical advertising, everything that we do goes through extensive review process. So not only on our side at the agency, but also on the client side. So Everything gets reviewed by lawyers. Everything gets reviewed by medical experts to make sure that anything we're saying is medically accurate. And everything gets reviewed by what's called regulatory, and they are looking at things against what the FDA requires in terms of their regulations. We would never make a claim about something that isn't true. It would never happen. And every time we do make a claim around how a drug works, how efficacious it is, you have to counter that with the safety information. So we always have that balance, which is why when you watch the TV commercials, you always hear what we call the fair balance. That's a legal requirement, and we're happy to do it. But it goes more than that. You're talking about people's lives and diseases that they have, and so you have to have that right tone. Sometimes you can be funny, but a lot of times you can't.
Yeah.
And so that tone becomes really, really important as well. We never lose sight that we're talking about serious conditions, and we are really trying to help people, and we want people and physicians to have the information that they need when they need it, and that they know accurate and helpful, content.
As the agency, do you have clients come to you and they've wrapped their mind around that concept, or are you working with them to sort of educate them on where those limits are, where those walls are, and where you really can't step much further outside of that?
We work together on it. So a lot of the marketing people who are our clients, of course we all know what those lines are, but we definitely try to go as far as we can, and then we get pulled back, and that's fine. But there is a line, but the idea of being respectful to our customers and understanding that these are serious diseases that we're working with, that is always a part of what we do.
Are there additional regulations that you and the creator and advertiser have to grapple with that are specific to medical and pharmaceutical advertising? I think of all the footnotes and all the subtext that you see.
It's a lot different, and a lot different. Not just because of all the footnotes that you're talking about. Every single thing that we say about a product has to be backed up with the right, clinical data. And we may want to say something like, oh, it works in 5 out of 10 people or 8 out of 10 people, and if we don't have 2 different sources that say that that's true, we can't say that. So, like I said, everything gets reviewed really tightly, and you have to, even when you're as an art director laying out a page or putting a commercial on, you have to prepare for all of that fair balance. Something as simple as when you're watching those TV spots, when they talk about all sort of the important information, the music behind it can't be too loud. It can't look completely different. It has to feel like it's part. There's a lot of regulations that you have to go through that match.
Have you ever had an instance where the music was questioned or challenged or had to be swapped for that reason?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, but all the spots that you see go to the FDA for approval before they get on air. And the FDA will come back, for guidance, and they'll come back to the agencies and say, the music is too loud, or you can't say it the way that you've said it. So absolutely, and then you have to make the adjustments based on, so first it goes through the agency review process, then it goes through the client review process, and then especially for the TV spots, it goes to the FDA, and they come back and say, you can't really say that, or you don't have enough balance there, or the music is too, whatever it is, absolutely.
Do all those regulations translate from broadcast to the new media space? So if you're gonna put something on TikTok, are they reviewing it with the same sort of guidelines that they would have had for the TV space?
Pretty much. It's highly regulated. Very different for everyone says, oh, it's just like financial, advertising, which is very well highly regulated as well, and it is. But, they have all their stuff in the mouse type. We don't really have that. Our fair balance has to be the same size as our claims. It's different.
With over 50 people on your account team, what's your approach to organizational leadership?
A lot of it is knowing my team and knowing how they work and what their strengths are, and putting, little teams together within my group that I know are going to work well together. That's number one. Number two is promoting them, making sure that they're getting new opportunities and moving around. And even if it's leaving my group to go work on another group for a really good opportunity, that's really important to me. giving them feedback, giving my team feedback a lot and often, and real-time feedback, super important for me. Giving people the opportunity to do new things and promoting them if they deserve it have been successful. I have, what we call, even though we're virtual now, an open door policy. Everybody on my team knows. They can always put time on my calendar or stop in and see me when I'm in the office. I want to get to know them. I want to help them.
Excellent. Has it always been your style?
Always.
Did you learn that from anyone, or is that just the way that you envision it needs to work and to be effective?
I think it's a little bit of both.
Yeah.
When I started working, the teams were much smaller and you did everything yourself. Mm-hmm. And over time, these teams have gotten larger. I kind of didn't have a mentor. I didn't have somebody to talk to a lot. My day-to-day when I was in my 20s working in, my first agencies. And so I always was like, I want to make sure that I'm there for these people. And I like it. Like, I still think of myself as young, and I get so much energy, and I learn so much from the more junior people on my team. It's one of the reasons why I'm here. They come in and everybody has so much energy and they want to learn, and they're like, tell me more. And I think it's great.
So for those folks who have all that energy and are trying to break into the industry, what is some advice you'd share with those looking to do high level and impactful advertising, whether a part of an agency or just as a freelancer trying to work with their first couple clients?
Advice I could give you guys, number one, if you're going into advertising, understand what you want to do, where do you want to focus. So I've been, even today, I was at the career fair a few days ago and I was talking to some students and they're like, oh, well, I'm interested in art direction and planning and account and production. I'm like, all of it. That's great. I am too. And you can do it all, but you got to pick one. Where are you starting from? So, starting out, I think that's one big piece of advice I would say. The second one is, I say this to my people all the time, be a sponge. Your first couple of jobs, get in there, learn as much as you can, listen. Don't always feel the need to speak. That's okay as well. Talk with your colleagues and work with them. Ask them questions. They will ask you questions. Like, that is super, super important when you get started in this business as well.
Well, Wendi, thank you for joining us. We appreciate all of the insight you've given us in agency life and in the medical and pharmaceutical space. This is really fascinating. And thank you, our viewers, for joining us. Until next time, good night.